That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, honestly, very sick here. This is not going to be a super structured video. What I'm probably going to do is just through this, we're going to talk about some players that have exponentially risen with their fantasy value over the past month and essentially just assess, okay, should we just be cashing out? Should we take our profits? Should we move on to the next stud player at that very top of the range? It's also not even true in that instance because we're going to be talking about some stud running backs, and then we're going to get to some like deeper wide receivers that we've had a ton of questions about in the live streams as of late. Y'all know we live stream every single night, but I know some people can't make it out to the live streams for whatever reason nonetheless. So we'll go through, we'll talk about some of those players. But before we do that, you know, we have to pull up our last YouTube video so we can give away some Fantasy Flock Network hats. Now, if you have not already, go down there, drop a like on that video, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. Just passed 60,000 subscribers. And every time you drop that like and leave a comment, you entered in to win a Fantasy Flock Network hat. Nonetheless, our winner is going to come out from Glenn and Julius. Thank you so much, of course, for supporting the channel and being a part of the flock. If you win that Fantasy Flock Network hat, just make sure you send me that email ASAP with your physical address. And lastly, please, for the love of God, if you enjoy the fact that we make multiple videos every single day, live stream every single night, if you want to support this channel, go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. When you sign up for Underdog Fantasy and make at least a $10 deposit, they match you dollar for dollar up to $100 on that deposit. And I genuinely mean there is no better way to support this channel than going and signing up for Underdog Fantasy. They have a ton of cool player props that, Thomas, can you throw up some of those player props on the screen as we go through and as we talk about these players? They have a ton of cool player props, and also they have drafts you can get into, just weekly drafts. If you want to draft a team just for week 10 with 12 random people or with myself on a live stream, you can definitely do that. You just have to make sure you sign up, use promo code FLOCK, and they'll match you dollar for dollar on that deposit. And yeah, let's go through. Let's bring up our stud running back here. Let's talk about Jonathan Taylor. Now with Jonathan Taylor, it's going to be funny that we're including him on this video because obviously this is a player that's at the very top of fantasy football right now. Like, he is in a completely different tier than a couple of the other players that we're going to be talking about. But nonetheless, I mean, talk about someone who's risen up just exponentially with their fantasy value over the past month. I mean, with Jonathan Taylor, it's laughable. We've already gone through it a ton. I don't necessarily think that we need to go through it yet again. Right now, he is the running back 2 on a points per game basis. This is someone that, I mean, he has not gone under 20 fantasy points since week 3. 20 points, 32 points, 29 points, 20 points, 21, 34. Now, what's very interesting with Jonathan Taylor here is if we're going to go through and look at the usage that Marlon Mack has had in this Indianapolis Colts offense. Now, y'all know I have been always the person to go out there and crap on Marlon Mack and say, like, what the hell? Why are y'all even bringing this running back up? There's no reason that we should even be talking about him this much. And it's kind of funny because, I mean, earlier in the year, you actually saw some usage for Marlon Mack. Like, going back to week 4, Marlon Mack, 10 carries, 2 targets out of the backfield. In week 5, 5 carries, 2 targets out of the backfield, which is fine. Like, you're fine seeing that with Mack. But the issue is when you're also getting the usage for Nyheim Hines, or if we're going to go through and look at what we've had from Nyheim Hines so far this season, Hines has had 35 targets through 9 weeks. And of course, you're not excited about Nyheim Hines or Marlon Mack at all, but you're a little bit worried that maybe they siphon off just enough value that Jonathan Taylor isn't that top 3 running back overall. Well, since then, if you're going to go through and track that Marlon Mack usage over the past month, Marlon Mack's just done. I wonder if the Indianapolis Colts thought, okay, if we highlight him a little bit in this Miami Dolphins game, if we get him 10 carries, if we kind of get him involved, could we trade him away for something? Clearly, they weren't able to. And nonetheless, you actually look at what we had against the Tennessee Titans in week 8. Nothing. I mean, he was active that game, didn't get a single touch. And he was out against the Jets in week 9. He's probably going to be out against the Jags in week 10 as well. And it's not like he's dealing with an injury. It's that Marlon Mack is currently a healthy scratch, which is opening up just more snaps and more touches overall for Jonathan Taylor. And that's just massive, and making Jonathan Taylor not necessarily a Najee Harris level player with his workload, but so much higher than what he was at the beginning of the season. And with Taylor, I mean, the reason that we loved him coming into fantasy drafts is based on the efficiency you knew he would have behind an elite offensive line, as well as based on the fact that if you just look at Jonathan Taylor and the running back that he was in Wisconsin coming into the NFL draft, one of the most talented running backs in the NFL. Now, I will admit that back in week 4, whenever we had the massive spike week, I was like, okay, well, we just had Quentin Nelson getting carted off. I mean, this team not looking that great. I started to get worried with Jonathan Taylor here. Nonetheless, happy that we have him on so many best ball teams. I would say going forward, I know a lot of people are going to hate hearing this from me. It could be an intriguing spot to move off Jonathan Taylor after week 10 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, Taylor has been dominant, and if you were trading Jonathan Taylor away, it's for a small list of players. And essentially, I think if 99% of people watching this video right now are ranking Taylor as the running back 1 overall, which probably most people are, I think it would be intriguing to see if we could pivot over and if we could get Najee Harris. And the reasoning behind this in a full PPR format is Harris has a greater workload while he is not nearly as talented as Jonathan Taylor. I want to get that out here right now. His offensive line is worse. He is not as talented. From a fantasy football standpoint, the volume is so damn high with Najee Harris, it's hard to overlook it. And with Jonathan Taylor, we have had these blow-up games like 34 points against the New York Jets. Week 10, remember, we had him ranked as our running back 1 against the Jets last week. We have him ranked as our running back 1 against the Jags this week as well in week 10. But then I think you could see Jonathan Taylor take a small step back. Reason being is you're going to have a couple of really tough matchups. You're going to have him going up against the Buffalo Bills in week 11, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week 12. He has yet to go through his bye week at the same time. He still has his bye. So if you're essentially just looking at Najee Harris and Jonathan Taylor, and you're saying, okay, well, Harris, on the other hand, this is a running back that you're just looking at the workload as 22 carries, 26 carries, 24 carries, 23 carries. He's had over 50 targets so far this season. This is a running back that the matchups aren't going to be that bad at all down the stretch. The worst matchup he will have is going to be going up against the Baltimore Ravens in week 13. You're already through the bye week as well. So if we can capture that one more spike week from Jonathan Taylor, have him as running back 1, then maybe move him for Najee Harris and get a slight upgrade at wide receiver, that could be intriguing. But nonetheless, if we're going to go over and we're going to look at my rest of season rankings, we have Jonathan Taylor in tier 1 with our running backs. And of course, you can always find our rest of season rankings on Patreon. We have Christian McCaffrey, Najee Harris, Jonathan Taylor as our top 3 running backs. Now, these rankings got updated on Patreon before Sam Darnold was looking like he was going to miss a significant amount of time, before you actually had Cam Newton signing to the Carolina Panthers. So I think that at this point, I would be fine if anybody wanted to move Christian McCaffrey behind Harris and Taylor, just knowing that Cam Newton will vulture a decent amount of rushing touchdowns away at the goal line from Christian McCaffrey. So maybe Najee Harris is my running back 1 rest of season. Maybe this is more so about buying Najee Harris than it is about selling Jonathan Taylor, because obviously Taylor has been dominant. He's my running back 1 this week. Expect him to have another solid performance. Now, y'all know Jonathan Taylor is one of our favorite draft picks at the end of the first, the beginning of the second. Let's talk about one of our favorite draft picks at the end of the second, the beginning of the third, Joe Mixon. Now, y'all know how much hate we got on Joe Mixon coming into the season. Our thought process and why we wanted to be going through and aggressively drafting Joe Mixon is based on the idea that here, this is a running back that was seeing a drastic improvement in his offense, with Jamar Chase being able to stretch the opponent's defense, and that's something that Cincinnati's lacked for a very long time. Also, this was going to be an improved offensive line. While, yes, we admitted it was not going to be a good one, it was going to be better than what it was last year based on a few key players getting healthy and also minimal investments that the Cincinnati Bengals made into that offensive line. Also, the development of Joe Burrow. And yeah, we really wanted to bet on the offense getting better. And also, we wanted to bet on Giovanni Bernard leaving and that opening up a ton of usage for Joe Mixon in the receiving game, which both of those things have happened. And a couple weeks ago, I was a little worried with Mixon here. Now, I'll say that obviously you couldn't just come out here and say exactly what we had with Mixon. And that's why, if you would have asked me 3 or 4 weeks ago on Joe Mixon, I would have given you a little spiel on why I thought that Joe Mixon was going to be a great player going forward. But we didn't have the numbers backing it up. And the issue is, with Joe Mixon, his season-long statistics, they are drastically skewed. Because if we're going to go back to week 4, we've already done this, we've already explained this a ton, but I just want to make sure that it's on record. If you're going back to week 4 against the Jacksonville Jaguars, he hurts his ankle in the 4th quarter there. So you really can't be looking at the split between Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon that week. And then in week 5 against the Green Bay Packers, there you had Joe Mixon probably not supposed to play that game. I think he probably just toughened it out and played it because it was a game that the Cincinnati Bengals really needed to win against the Green Bay Packers. And then, so he split the backfield 50-50 with Samaje Perine, but he wasn't healthy. Then week 6 against the Lions, you had Samaje Perine on the COVID list, so we didn't really know what we could take from that game. But against the Jets, against the Browns, we're starting to get a real good idea of the workload that we can expect from Joe Mixon. And this is not necessarily a running back that's going to be seeing just 30 touches every single week. He is not going to be Najee Harris, and I'll tell you right now, I am just in love with Harris and the workload that he has. I think we have to make him our running back 1. But nonetheless, Perine is having a small role in this offense. It's not necessarily mattering, however, and this is something we talk about all the time, because what matters at the running back position? Is it the raw number of touches, or is it the usage in the red zone and the usage in the receiving game? This is something that we have shown the research this offseason. I think a lot of people are starting to get smarter. A lot of people are beginning to talk about this as well. But you want to be chasing these high value touches, the opportunity in the passing game and the opportunity in the red zone, because those carries between the 20-yard lines, they don't matter at all. The perfect example is go to Green Bay over the past 4 seasons. Look at Aaron Jones and his elite production, even though Jamal Williams is getting about 40% of the touches in that backfield. It never mattered. And of course, Aaron Jones was a significantly better running back in that instance. But still, I mean, it's not like Aaron Jones, the elite of the elite running back. And I mean, you can't even consider playing Jamal Williams because Jamal Williams is that bad at football. No, it's because, I mean, you get the usage in the red zone. And if we're going to go through, if you're going to look at what we have had from Samaje Perine, I mean, he's had 2 touchdowns so far this season. And this is also a player that if you remove against week 5 in the Green Bay Packers, if you remove that 1 week in particular, that's actually going to go down to only giving him 1 touchdown, and that's going to go down to only giving him 10 targets on the season. Only 10 targets out of the backfield here. And that's the week that we really need to remember to move, because remember, Joe Mixon wasn't healthy. Joe Mixon probably shouldn't have even played that game. So Mixon, I'm all in on buying. I'll say at this point, if you're going to be looking at the matchups that he has upcoming, not necessarily the toughest until we get to week 15. When we get to week 16, he has the Broncos and the Ravens. Obviously, that's not great. He'll be on his bye this week. Raiders, Steelers, Chargers, 49ers. I think we can play him confidently in every single one of those matchups. I'm going to go over to Patreon real quick, pull up where I have Joe Mixon in our rest of season rankings. I have him at running back 11. Honestly, I could see the argument to move him. You know what? I'm doing it. We had Joe Mixon ranked ahead of Nick Chubb coming into the season for a PPR format. Yes, we had that. And I think there's no reason to not have it that way now. We're going to have Joe Mixon in that same tier with Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift, Ezekiel Elliott, and we're going to have him as our running back 10. So I think if you can trade Nick Chubb and go get Joe Mixon, that's going to be a no-brainer as we had it coming into the season. Okay, so now let's go to a running back that we got so wrong. I don't even want to say we got him wrong. James Conner. Now with Conner, y'all know we've always said if Chase Edmonds goes down, James Conner is going to be a running back 1 in fantasy. And that's what we're going to see here this past week, 40 fantasy points. And we had a lot of people in the live streams coming out. And I think it's just that they're very nice to me. I think it's just that they're very kind and are obviously members of the flock. So they're going, okay, Mason, is this the clear point for James Conner? Are we selling James Conner? Are we moving off the James? No, we can't sell James Conner. No, you're not selling Conner. This is a running back that over the next month, he is going to be a running back 1 in fantasy. Now, it is concerning with the Kyler Murray injury. Now, I know that Colt McCoy looked fine this past week. Now, in a season-long standpoint, you're not going to be betting on Colt McCoy, to say the least. You definitely want Kyler in here. Even though Kyler, as a quarterback, we know that he will vulture rushing touchdowns at the goal line. You don't necessarily love that. But nonetheless, I mean, with Kyler Murray, he's just going to elevate the entire offense, given the extra first downs they'll pick up, given the extra trips to the red zone that they will have. So it sucks that he's going to be a game-time decision against the Panthers at the same time. But nonetheless, if you're going to be looking at James Conner here, I think that you have to naturally assume that even though it's a pretty, I don't even want to say it's a tough matchup against the Panthers, they have a better pass defense than they have a run defense. Nonetheless, I think if you're going to be looking at James Conner, this is a running back that he's going to go from getting about 30 to 40% of the snaps in Arizona. It's crazy. One of the reasons I was saying to sell high on James Conner earlier this season is because he was only getting 30 to 40% of the snaps in Arizona here, where you actually had Chase Edmonds getting 60 to 70% of the snaps every single week. It was like one of the craziest things ever. And if you're going to be looking at Eno Benjamin, yes, Eno Benjamin will have a role in this offense. I don't want to be just completely scratching Eno Benjamin off and going, okay, well, all of a sudden James Conner is going to be what Alexander Mattison is when Dalvin Cook goes down. No, he's not going to have that same workload, because Conner, I think that if Arizona was smart, they would be a little cautious given James Conner's own injury history. And for that reason, I think you should most likely pick up Eno Benjamin and have him on your roster. Nonetheless, I would expect that maybe Eno Benjamin gets about 25 to 30% of the snaps for Arizona. And if Eno Benjamin's getting 25 to 30% of the snaps, James Conner is going to be doubling his workload of what he has had so far this season. Now, I'll say with him doubling his workload, You're not going to be expecting the touchdown volume to double because there were really no other touchdowns in this backfield besides what James Conner was picking up to begin with, because obviously he is the red zone running back for Arizona. But what's very telling here is with James Conner, what you actually had with his involvement in the receiving game. Now, I'd say, Benjamin, he was a great receiving running back in college. I definitely want to put that little asterisk out there. But Conner, I think he's going to get a lot more snaps between the 20s, and he will get targeted out of the backfield. And if we're going through and remembering James Conner, while definitely catching the ball is not necessarily his specialty, if you're going to be looking at just his entire career, we will have instances where James Conner's come out. I mean, back in 2018, this was a running back that plays 13 games. He gets 71 targets out of the backfield. I mean, that is drastically more than what he was having previously. I mean, this was a running back that wasn't even averaging a reception a game at the beginning of the year. Now, if you're going to go through, if you're going to divide 17 by 13 to get an idea of his targets per game, he was averaging 5.5 targets a game. I mean, he's just coming off a week with 5 receptions when you have Chase Edmonds going down. So James Conner, he's a completely different running back. I know we were saying to sell at a much lower point earlier this season. Let's get it on the record. If you listen to me, if you sold James Conner when we said to, yeah, you didn't get half the price that you could get now. But still, if I'm pulling up my up-to-date rest of season rankings, I have James Conner as running back 17. I have him as that mid to high-end running back 2. Now, yes, if we could trade him for Leonard Fournette, James Robinson, Cordell Patterson, Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley, Darrell Henderson, yeah, we're going to go through. We're going to make that play just because with James Conner, he is not going to be giving you that elite production in the fantasy football playoffs because you will have Chase Edmonds back by then. But if you're a team that possibly needs wins right now, like say you're a team that is 3-6, there's no better trade target for you than James Conner, because while you're not going to have to pay that tippity top price, knowing that he is not going to get that fantasy production for the fantasy football playoffs, if you're 3-6, the playoffs don't matter. You need to be putting up points right now, or you're not even going to be able to dream about being in the fantasy football playoffs. So I think for a roster that's 3-6, that's 2-7, hell yeah, go trade for James Conner. I will say if you're 8-1, 9-0, and you have the running back depth, say you have 2 top end running backs that you're going to be looking to play every single week, regardless of James Conner's opportunity in Arizona, then yeah, you go through, you sell James Conner, package him together with your tight end, try to get Travis Kelce, package him together with the wide receiver, try to go get Devontae Adams. But nonetheless, I'm assuming that most people watching this video don't have multiple running back ones on their team. At least if you've been watching this channel for long enough, you probably don't, because I'm an idiot, obviously. But I think that James Conner is just going to give you that elite production over the next month. I'm going to be looking to hold. If we were to sell, it'd be after this week when I think he actually gets a bump up in value. Now let's go to the last player. We were going to talk about some wide receivers here, but I definitely want to just continue to hammer in what we have had with some of these running backs. Let's talk about Elijah Mitchell. Now with Elijah Mitchell, this is a running back that we included on our sell high video after week 8, after he came off 2 back-to-back performances against the Colts and the Bears when he went over 100 rushing yards in both contests. And yeah, against the Cardinals, the usage looks completely different. The carries get cut in half, 18 carries the first 2 weeks. He gets 8 carries this past week. Now, what's very notable is he actually ends up coming away with 5 receptions week 9 against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, this is mainly due to the game flow. Obviously, this was a team that was trailing pretty much the entire game here, so they had to abandon the run. They had to look to throw the ball. And now, let me also just put this little asterisk out there. Y'all know I've never been a Jeff Wilson stan. I'm not out here ever saying, okay, you know what, Jeff Wilson, yeah, this is going to be the guy. Jeff Wilson's coming in. He's going to be the starting running back for San. No, that's not happening. Jeff Wilson, I think that he will eventually work himself into, when he's healthy, having a small role in this offense. And that's one of the few things that's going to be scaring me about Elijah Mitchell here. Because if we're going to go over and we're going to look at JaMychal Hasty, Hasty's had a workload over the past 3 weeks. Like over the past 3 weeks, JaMychal Hasty, this is a running back that, I mean, he has had about 3 targets a game over the past 3 weeks. And now I know the carries aren't necessarily there, but I mean, this is a running back that siphoned off 5 points, sent 4.5 points against Elijah Mitchell over the past 3 weeks. So if all of a sudden you get this backfield, which, I mean, we've seen Kyle Shanahan do it before. If you get this backfield split into 3 players with Jeff Wilson just getting an extra, say, 3 or 4 carries away from Elijah Mitchell is going to be all of a sudden a running back that's getting on average about 12 carries a game. That's getting about 2 to 3 receptions. I still think Elijah Mitchell is going to be a sell for us. I mean, it's going to be a tough matchup this week against the Rams. Then he has some decent matchups against the Jags, the Vikings, and the Seahawks. Nonetheless, I'm going to be looking to pivot off of Elijah Mitchell. He has had some strong performances as of late, but as we said last week, I mean, I think there are enough red flags from the usage standpoint in San Francisco, and I think that we're kind of seeing the ceiling here with Elijah Mitchell. Now, if Mitchell's your running back 2 and you go, okay, well, Mason, I don't really need to focus in on having an elite ceiling. We have Derrick Henry hopefully coming back in the fantasy football playoffs. I just need a running back to plug and play over the next month and just try to get me some mid to low end running back 2 production. Elijah Mitchell's your guy. But a lot of the rosters that I break down on Patreon, a lot of the rosters that I'm looking at in those live streams, people are sending them over to me and going, okay, Mason, Elijah Mitchell is my running back 4 here. What am I doing? Going, you're trading away Elijah Mitchell. Use him in a package. Try to get an upgrade somewhere else because there are other teams in your league that could use Elijah Mitchell's production. I mean, he doesn't really have the ceiling to jump up to be in a range where, I mean, Javonte Williams is the perfect example. I mean, who would you rather have as your running back 2 on your roster right now? Elijah Mitchell or Javonte Williams? I mean, if you need wins, probably Elijah Mitchell because Elijah Mitchell is going to have that workload. However, if they're your running back 4 and you're not starting either player this week, hell yeah, go get Javonte Williams because he's going to have such a higher ceiling at the end of the year based on the prospect profile he had coming into the season. So it's an interesting call with Elijah Mitchell, though. I do think that there are going to be a lot of rosters that should go and explore options of trading him away, especially before this week against the Los Angeles Rams. But of course, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Hopefully my voice didn't sound too gross in this. Make sure you go down there, drop that like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. Nothing helps us out more other than going and signing up for Underdog Fantasy. And when you make that first deposit, they'll match you dollar for dollar up to $100. I'm sure y'all saw a ton of the player props listed off in this video, as well as, I mean, you can get into some drafts with us on the live stream when you go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. So please make sure you take advantage of that. And yeah, that's all I got for you. Have a great day, and I hope to see y'all on the live stream tonight.